So I've decided to go with my sisters. So I've gone as a little duo because there's three of us. I'm basically at the avenue, going with the avenue that the most inspiring women in my life are my sisters, because they are both women that have families and maintain their families whilst keeping a house tidy, keeping everything going in their lives and working. I find that super inspirational because it's not a route I've taken yet in my life. I've gone much more down like corporate working route. So to see them do everything and spin like 40,000 plates, super inspirational, like super mums. And they even find time to go to the gym as well. And I'm like, how? I can't even organize my life like that. How do you do that?
My mum. And the reason I will say my mum is because not only did she raise me on her own, she also had a job, and very similar to your sisters, she managed everything. And I feel that her doing it by herself has really given me that mindset of you can do it by yourself and you don't need anyone else. And yeah, she's always had the mindset of women in particular, we are equal and we're strong, and don't let anyone else tell you any different. So I come from quite a strong-minded family of women that, yeah, they don't take anything from anyone. And I think I've kind of brought that into my own life, maybe not as aggressive. But yeah, I find it's an interesting topic. I find the inequality, International Women's Day, things like that, because as I think I've mentioned to you both, because I naturally push against gender norms, social expectations that I believe are there, I don't always see or feel how other women may do. I also am very aware that I'm in quite a stereotypically female-led role, but in a male-dominated industry. So I have kind of a mixed experience, I guess, from where I sit within our business compared to others. But
it is interesting as well because in my family, they've all stayed in the same industry. So they've all stayed very much like childcare and all working in schools. And I started doing that. And then I moved into more, I guess, corporate-based sales work and then here. But it was so different, that kind of gender equality then, because obviously you're just mainly working around females in schools. There obviously was males, but here in the corporate kind of industry is where I've noticed it more, that it's challenged. And it's just more, I think I've thought about it more, and the fact that I'm a female in this environment, but only because I'm surrounded by quite dominant and intelligent males.
And I think we are quite lucky in some respects in the corporate world because we work for startups, larger organizations where, let's say, it's a bit more traditional, really, really struggled with that kind of environment where you are treated as the woman. Whereas in startups, I think there's just so much to do. Everyone rolls up their sleeves, and there's no time for inequality or, not handing roles over or listening to different people within a room, because there's no time for it.
100%. Where I worked before as well, it again was really big, like big corporate company, but even down to things like because it was a sales environment and it was very much like if you hit targets, you would then go on to get certain things as a reward. These like days out and all those types of things were very much led around that kind of like laddie group vibe, because it was a male dominated industry. I then didn't really like that kind of environment and that kind of competitive, and to be rewarded for making sales means you go out and drink with the lads. Like, that's just not always that appealing, I think. Maybe not just to women, but yeah, primarily to women. So I prefer that, definitely, being in a startup now, because there's just more that you can get involved in, and to be rewarded for your work. It's more like the whole culture is supported.
I do find that interesting because typically you'll find that there'll be the males are the senior roles, and they're the ones that will decide what the benefits are and what's going to be used for how do we treat someone. So they're not, I don't want to make an assumption or a generalization. However, I do find that they will typically go for something that they enjoy. So as an example, going for a pint down the pub, even not just for something that's potentially stereotypically more women like it, it's also thinking about other differentiations, such as if someone's religious, I don't know, could be anything, right? So it's finding a culture where people are more conscientious of their people's environments and their beliefs and what actually someone may enjoy. So yeah, I agree. It's just because we are a startup, and that startup mentality of collaboration and wanting to hear from others, that's also contributed to how we as a business reward our employees.
Lauren,
For
I feel
sure.
like we haven't asked you now. We've got to open the floor to you for your inspirational person and woman and why.
Oh yeah, we're still in the first question. So mine might be a bit of a cop-out because I've actually chosen multiple women in my life. I essentially have a squad of people that I have gathered throughout my life, whether they're school friends, old colleagues, old managers, mentors, who I call on when I need advice. They are very happy to call me out when I'm being avoidant or challenging me on things where I'm maybe not behaving in the best way. But they're also my cheerleaders, and having a group of women who are each individually successful in their own right, like some of them are leading businesses, some, like you were saying, are mums, and they're managing, families and looking after parents, and it's just this mix of people who have so much to offer, and I can lean on them and they can lean on me, and just knowing that squad is there inspires me every day.
I love that.
Wow.
That's so interesting as well, because I do think in order to say that a woman inspires you, this is what I think, it needs to be someone that you not only like lifts you up, but points out when you're doing things wrong.
Yeah.
And like helps you to improve 100%. I will open up the next question because I wanted us to discuss basically what you think the biggest issues that women face in this era working in tech and business. From my perspective, obviously, I've always been on the hiring background and the hiring side, but from my opinion and from what I've seen and noticed, I think the biggest issue that women face now is the fact that when people are reviewing candidates as such, or when people are looking for people that are suitable for roles, I find that if there is a woman on there that has potentially had a career gap because she's maybe taken 2-3 years to raise a family and raise children, I think that sometimes is something that is looked down upon because, yeah, she may have had a good career at the beginning and worked 4 or 5 years as a software developer, but then because she chose to go on to have children for 3 years and spend the first 3 years with them, that is then looked at, oh, well, you're not as experienced as someone else. So I think it isn't something that should be looked down upon. We should be given the same opportunity as a man that hasn't had to take 3 years out to look after children, or if he has, it should be the same kind of opportunities for both. So I think that's a big issue that women face, because ultimately, if we are women that want to have a family, then we are always going to face a time out of our career. And I don't think it should be something that's looked down upon. And I do think even if we do take a few years out of our employment to have a family, that doesn't mean that we can't go into something and train and learn new things within that to be back at the peak of our career where we were before. What about you, Lauren?
So there's obviously all the obvious things like gender pay gap and women in leadership, and those are all incredibly important things, especially representation in finance and tech industries. But I think for me, the biggest issue is unrealistic expectations. So I was luckily raised in a family or in a way where I was told that I could do and be and achieve anything. There wasn't male, female roles or anything I could that was off limits because I was a woman. But I was also raised to be the caregiver and, a mother and the cook and the housekeeper and all those sorts of things, the organizer. So for me, I feel like my list of things that I could do and should do is really long. And finding those, that list quite overwhelming. And I know a lot of women feel the same way. And I guess it's just, you can, even though you're succeeding in some aspects of your life, because you've got such a long list, you might be failing in other parts or failing in other parts. And so that leads to things like lower confidence or imposter syndrome and those kinds of things. And maybe you're not putting yourself out there as much or speaking up as much. So it's the biggest issue is not being kind to ourselves and setting realistic expectations of what's actually achievable.
I think it's harder as well when you get into like the age where I am now. Those expectations, I think they just like almost increase as well. Because it's like when you get to the stage of like, oh, what should I do next? Am I at the peak of my career? Should I do something else? Am I ready to have family? Should I do this? And I find they just increase. And sometimes, are that unreal expectation of what should I be doing next as a woman?
I think to be honest, I agree with both of what you're saying. I think that I see it on a broader scale of, this is my personal opinion, that we live in a patriarchal society. And due to that and the social expectations that we have from literally the day you're born, the labels that you're given, you are put on a certain path. And I do see that our society is changing. And I find it interesting when, especially in an environment like ours that's so diverse and has different backgrounds, that you hear those different opinions and you start to see things from a different lens. And I find that the more we as individuals and the more we as a business push that culture of, we recognize you as an individual and your environment and whatever you've got going on, and it's not an expectation from us of you have to do absolutely everything here and at home, depending on what that list is. And yeah, I think it's just a shift in mindset that's just going to take time.
No, I agree though, because I do think it's like going back to that on the expectations as well, and maybe that's just because of the era we live in, but I do feel like for women, this is maybe from a personal point of view, there is always that expectation of like, even going into any kind of work environment, like, what do I look like today? Do I look ready for a meeting today? Maybe if I didn't put my eyebrows on today, would everyone in my meeting think that I don't look ready for work? But I mean, I'm happy to do things with no makeup, but how would other people perceive me like that? Do you know what I mean? Because I have gone into the workplace before with no makeup on when I've come back off holiday and thought, oh, I look glowing with a tan on my face. And everyone's like, is everything okay? You've got a meeting today. And I'm like, yeah, I just thought I looked fresh. But it's like, I don't think that's ever something that men have to worry about. Like, what do I look like today? Do I look professional because I haven't brushed my hair today? Does it look okay? I think there's that constant pressure.
As we were saying, Amy, like I think women tend to be raised to be perfect, which is unachievable.
I do think as a society, we are becoming more open-minded and accepting of people's kind of differences. And I would say that people are much more open to talk about like their feelings in this era now and how certain things make them feel. So I would like to think that we would come out of that era. But I think working in a startup, you can already see that that's something like that pressure from where I've moved from a corporate environment to a startup where everyone's much more individual and we embrace the like everyone being individual. That pressure is instantly lifted just from the culture. So it's interesting that going somewhere smaller and somewhere where people have their own like individual selves and are allowed to embrace that, how when you join somewhere like that, it's like you almost have to train yourself to feel more comfortable in that environment because it doesn't feel like normal, but the pressure is eased. I mean, that was really interesting for me when I joined Validis because I wasn't used to that.
You're so right, and I'm just thinking now, you know, over the last couple of decades, how women are perceived and how they sort of behave in the work environment. And I remember initially it was very much, if you wanted to be successful as a woman, you had to behave like a man. Whereas now it's becoming more acceptable for women to be more emotive and be more feminine. And we've got a long way to go, but there's definitely been progress on that front in the sort of last decade, I think.
Amy, I'm going to come to you to answer first. What message do you think is important to send to young women now who are thinking about moving into a career in tech and business?
I think for young women in particular, they need to, what I would recommend, learning more about yourself and having the confidence in yourself and who you are as a person first. I think that even if you feel self-conscious or you're not quite sure or you feel like you're going to ask a silly question, it's really not that big a deal. And if you enjoy something and you're passionate about something, don't let anyone else put you off. I think that you hold strong and you believe in what you're saying and you will succeed in whatever you want to succeed in.
Yeah, I love that.
Inspiring.
And I felt getting a bit emotional then. No, I love that. I think I was going to say a really similar point, so now you've kind of caught me off guard with what I was thinking. But I guess adding onto it, the message that I would send alongside what you said, Amy, of like embracing and being, I guess, who you want to be and going with that avenue of what you want to go with, especially in tech and business. It's an important thing to never look at a role and think that you wouldn't be accepted into that because you're a female. And from being in the tech industry and hiring in the tech industry, I think because it is quite male, well, it is male dominated, like that's a fact. And I think out of potential 10 candidates, 1 in them would be a female. So I think if I was a young person now, the advice I would want is to not be like shunned off from following a career that I wanted in tech and business because it is a male dominated industry and because I think I'm always going to be up against men, because I think that's how we change the norm, and that's how we make tech and business not a male dominated industry, by younger women having the confidence to say, I want to be a software developer, and if that's what I want to do, I'm going to do it. Not, I want to be a software developer, but I'm going to have to work alongside 10 men and I don't think they'll accept me. Like, I think, yeah, having the confidence to go forward, similar to what you said, with the industry that you would want to work in, whether it is or isn't dominated by males, would be my little words of wisdom. What about you, Lauren?
So mine is more of a plea than a message, and is essentially like, we need you.
Yeah.
We need more female representation in tech companies where the future of the world essentially is being designed and built. I mean, there's no denying that men and women are wired differently. Women are designed to create communities and to nurture them, and we need that way of thinking when we're building products and technology, because it just means that ultimately we'll end up with a more inclusive, nurturing product that leaves the world in a better place. And let's be honest, looking back at this patriarchal society, we're not usually great at making decisions that are for the greater good. Please join a tech company.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, and just on top of that, like I'm in marketing, but I have worked very closely with lots of like product and engineering teams. And there is something that is so incredibly rewarding about the process of designing and building and creating something, you know, putting your baby out there to the world. So if that is something, if you want to be in a world where you're creating things, or in a role where you're creating things, then think about becoming a developer or an engineer or product manager.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think when you think of certain roles in tech and in business, I do it. I think of men, because you rarely see women doing it, which is a shame, really, because there's obviously lots of intelligent women out there who could still fulfill that role at the same level as a man, and if not even better. But because we don't have the society backing us there, that we could do it, and the confidence to do it, I think it is a case of, it is just such a male dominated industry. And I think I even like frown upon it myself, and I think I look at software developers as men, because I shouldn't, because women can be that too. But no, I'm with you on the plea. Join tech, join business as well. And then look for those companies that allow you to be whoever you want to be, because it isn't a case of you can't be a extrovert software developer. Do you know what I mean? If that's the person you want to be, or a data engineer, I think find those companies that allow you to be completely individual in who you are, like as a person, and who you want to be in your career. That's my drop the mic moment.
I love that.
Yeah, it's challenge your own biases as well as others, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just to add on to what you said about when you envision a CEO, a software engineer, you automatically think of a man. I actually saw that on social media today, I think. And there was like 2 posters, and one was imagine a CEO, imagine a nurse, the CEO being a man and the nurse being a woman. And I do find that, again, I will go from a sociological perspective, but because we're in I believe that we're in a patriarchal society, it's constantly everywhere. It's on TV shows, it's on, I don't know, in magazines and things like that, that it's constantly reiterated of that particular social expectation and those pigeonholes. And now we're in a position where I think our generation have very much pushed against that. And I think the more we continue to drive that mindset, it will naturally encourage younger generations to do the same. Yeah. I just want to recognize as well that if someone wants to be and quite happy being in a certain gender normative role, then that's not wrong either. It's just being able to accept that someone else might not want to, and being able to appreciate that there are differences, and accepting that people from various backgrounds can actually bring a lot to the table and give you a different perspective, and how can we make something better?
Yeah. I think in an ideal world, it would just be great for women to go into their like studies, for example, because I think a lot of tech roles, potentially you would need to consider studying and learning before, not always, but in quite a lot of them. I think it would be great to envision like a time where you are literally looking at what you want to do and what you want to be and how you're going to study for that, and not even consider, should I be doing that because I'm a woman? Like, should I not just go and do something different that I see women advertised doing? I think that would be the ultimate goal, to just not even to be a consideration that we have to think, oh, isn't that more of a man's job? Like, if you want to go and be a bus driver or go and be a mechanic, go and do that. That's a long-term goal. But I think eventually for us to just, have that society where you can literally do whatever you want to do and you don't even consider it being a man's job would be, I think, the end goal.
Totally agree.
Love that. Yeah, I'm going to stop recording.